So, at a time when food inflation currently stands at more than 40% and general inflation is at 33%, yet another tax in Nigeria as the people grapple with the worst cost of living crisis in decades. And so it's not surprising that Nigerians across the country have roundly condemned the new 0.5% levy on electronic banking transactions, which, according to the central bank, is intended to raise money to enhance cybersecurity. The Nigeria Labour Congress, which represents tens of millions of Nigerian workers, has rejected the levy, and civil society groups are threatening to sue the government. Bizarrely, the government has been on a drive to move towards a cashless economy, but it appears to have done a huge disservice to that drive, as more people will most certainly be dealing in cash now as they try to avoid paying the levy. Already there are fears that if the government doesn't reverse its decision to impose this levy, it could lead to another cash shortage, such as we saw last year after the central bank introduced currency reforms intended to cut fraud in the 2023 election. Well, in the wake of the uproar, it's emerged that the House of Representatives has asked the Central Bank of Nigeria to withdraw the levy, or at the very least reissue the rather ambiguous circular that announced it. So, how is all this likely to end? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the APC Chieftain and former Senator, Dr. Olanrewaju Tejuoso, who until recently was the Pro-Chancellor of the University of Lagos. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Good evening, Charles. Hello, Nigerians.
So it's not enough for the APC government that since President Tinubu took office a year ago, inflation has risen to unprecedented heights as a result of his decision to remove the petrol subsidy and devalue the currency, which has ultimately affected the cost of production, goods and services, indeed everything. He had to add insults to injury, to quote one person, by introducing this latest levy. What is your reaction to that, as someone who has been a senator and obviously has a constituency, or had, and is currently an APC chieftain?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to speak as an APC chieftain. I'm not an APC spokesperson, but I'll just talk.
So you're in the party, though?
Yeah, of course I'm in the party.
And you've won, and you've been a senator under
Of course,
the
APC
umbrella.
is my party any day. What I'm trying to say now is
You're not an official spokesman.
I'm not an official
we know that,
spokesperson.
obviously.
So I am just speaking.
You're an unofficial spokesman.
Yes, unofficial Nigerian.
Right.
Not as an APC member, because I was not directed to say anything on behalf of the party. But it is very straightforward. The present government is inheriting a big problem. Government is a continuum. You cannot deny your past government that you are in the same party. But then we need to put a very big human face to any intervention that we want to do at this stage. I believe all the intentions of this present government are very good, but directed at the wrong people. We need to leave about 80% of Nigerians alone in all these interventions. We don't need to burden them further concerning all these levies that are being introduced. We have about 20% of Nigerians that can solve all our problems.
Including yourself, of course.
Well, if you say so, but for example, a bank yesterday declared dividends of about 250 billion dividends. So that's about 5% of what the 0.5% cyber levy will achieve. So why don't we focus on these institutions that have the money to give out? So even in the bank today, when you have a transfer of 5 million, what is your levy on that is different if you have a transfer of just 10,000 naira. So I think we should have a kind of limit.
There's a cap.
Yes, a cap.
Right.
And then this whole 0.5% can be for anyone that is doing transactions more than 5 million. I'm sure this outcry will not be this much if we direct these interventions in the right direction. The masses, I mean, the people in Nigeria, I mean, how many people will transfer more than 5 million at a time? So let us leave this intervention.
So that's your advice to your party?
That's my advice to my government.
Right, because I mean, a lot of people would agree with you that, I mean, it is important, obviously, for the government to do the things that it wants to do and the things that it promised it would do.
Yes.
Obviously, it needs money to do that, but you can't step on the people's throats with your boots in order for society to advance.
Exactly.
I'm sure you know that there is, of course, more. I mean, and it's important to note that you're not actually disagreeing with the people who are saying that this is one step too far. I mean, you've got the electricity tariff, which for some Nigerians has gone up by about 300%. You've got a telecoms tariff, which is expected to come soon. All this in a bid to boost revenue, because in addition to introducing these new taxes, the administration is also beginning an aggressive implementation of tax laws.
Again, it's still the same direction I mentioned. Majority of Nigerians that are going to be affected negatively, of course, very large population, but we can just focus now on people that are getting much more than they need.
But a lot of people would make the argument that it actually goes against capitalist theory and capitalist practice, because there's always been that sense, which is why in so many places, they cut taxes for the rich so that they'll invest more and create more jobs, and there'll be a trickle-down approach. You're saying that we should do the opposite and go and tax those people, because if you do, then they will be less likely to invest their money in society.
Nigeria is a very peculiar country. The kind of profit you make in Nigeria today, you can't make in the United Kingdom, you can't make in the United States. So we can't compare all these theories. Nigeria today, at least for the first tenure of our president, the first 4 years, I would say that we should make it the Nigerian way, because we need to come out of all these problems. So let us focus on the larger population and let no pressure be put on that population for these first 4 years. Let us stabilize. It has been very rough. Where we are today, I mean, it's unprecedented. So let us now do something different to make sure that we stabilize the majority of the population. Let everybody be happy. Then in 4 years' time, by the next tenure, we can start all these reforms. We don't need it now.
That's a good point.
For the masses. We need it for the sacrifice that we need to make must be at the top echelon of the society. Right. So we don't need it now for the masses.
So in other words, the government should proceed with what it intends to do.
Yes.
But if it's going to impose additional taxes, it needs to be taxed. The bigger companies, the wealthier people have to be taxed.
Exactly, yes.
And what about things like the petrol subsidy that's been removed and the devalue? Because I mean that has already had a knock-on effect.
The petrol subsidy, for example.
Do you think it should be brought back?
No, but we have the NNPC. Now they are involved at the retail level. We have so many NNPC stations today. So why can't the NNPC stations concentrate on serving the lower cadre of the population? The lowest price for petrol can be gotten from NNPC stations. There could be long queues, but yes, that's the price to pay for this benefit. So let them be the ones to give the lowest price. The 20% of the population that I mentioned earlier, they can go and buy from any other private station at any price. But the subsidy should be for only NNPC stations.
Right. And I'm sure you know that all this is happening while there is still no agreement between the government and the labor unions on the minimum wage. So, as someone said, let the poor die.
Well, I mean, the issue of minimum wage is a very sensitive issue because I know how much someone can use to get a decent meal in Nigeria and what you can use to get a decent meal in London, for example. Not comparable. So when you're going to compare the wages of both countries,
well, nobody's comparing the wages.
No, because if you look at the data that is being proposed, they will tell you in Ghana, this is how much the minimum wages. In Europe, this is the minimum wages, and they are kind to get a kind of average. But then, if you're in Nigeria, when you go for lunch or dinner, I'm talking about, middle or lower class, you cannot get the kind of food at the price you get it in the other countries.
In fairness to the Labour Congress, they have worked out, based on not only the inflation rate, but the cost of food and all the rest of it, they've worked out, and the devaluation of the currency, that if you measure what it was that people were getting when they were getting 30-something thousand naira, to bring it up to what it is today, added with inflation, added with the cost of living crisis, goods and services, transport, all the rest of it, that you would be looking at the same thing that they were getting previously now being worth about 600 and something thousand naira.
Well, you see,
so it's not that they're not making any. They're not trying to say that, oh well, we're now going to move up from eating at the booker on the road to eating at a Chinese restaurant. That's not what they're saying.
Well, that is just one example.
Right.
Look at the issue of paying rent. In Nigeria, if you don't pay the rent for 1 year, you may never get any accommodation.
In fact, some of them ask for 2 years.
Oh, okay, 2 years. Even some 5 years.
Completely
in Lagos.
Unacceptable.
Okay, so in countries that you are comparing with Nigeria, you pay monthly rents. So why can't the government, the National Assembly, the state assemblies, introduce laws that you cannot take more than 1 month rent from anybody?
I absolutely agree.
Then you ease the burden of the people.
But I find it extraordinary that people like you who were in the Senate, where you make laws. I mean, you always seem to come up with better ideas when you're out of the national. I mean, you were there.
Yes. But,
why didn't you push for these laws?
Unfortunately, 4 years is not enough.
No. But
to finish what you...
I
we have our achievements during our 4 years.
Yeah,
but you can't finish everything, can you?
Well, you can't. But there are crucial things that you can attend. I mean, I'm wondering why... because what happens is that you do a list of priorities.
Yes.
I mean, it's like anything, and then you tick them off.
Yes, the priority I had was health. And today, I'm very proud that I introduced the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund that made sure that we had at least 1% of the Consolidated Revenue Fund in the health budget, which is statutory.
So that's one
It must
thing.
come. I was chairman Health Committee of the Senate for my tenure. So I had to focus, first of all, on my portfolio. And, I will advise my colleagues that are in other portfolios what to do. But if they don't do it, what can I do?
Right. Well, we're not here to sort of leap down on you from a great height. The point is the point is that I'm sure. I mean, let's return to that levy.
Yes.
And I think you've made some very good points here that a lot of people will echo and will support. But I'm sure there's also a lot of confusion trailing this levy. I mean, I was talking to Ariza political editor earlier, Sumner Sambo, and it's not clear, for instance, whether the levy is 0.5% or 0.005%. Are you able to shed any light on that? I mean, I'm not putting you on the spot or anything as an APC insider, because it doesn't appear as if the Cybercrime Amendment Act of 2024 provides for a 0.5% levy But, I mean, there's an argument about whether that's what it provides for, whether it provides for a 0.005% levy. And the question has now arisen, is 0.005 the same as 0.5%? And I understand there's another amendment that makes them the same. So the point here, though, is that there is, I mean, unquestionably confusion about it. And that's the point, isn't it?
I want to apologize for turning it around. I want to interview you briefly on that. Who is the beneficiary of this levy? Is it the government or the citizenry?
Well, I mean, it is the government's job to regulate things.
Yes.
And to impose, I mean, to clarify things and to impose, to execute laws and keep, law and order within society.
Okay. To an average Nigerian, when you talk about cybersecurity, cyber crimes, the first thing that comes to that individual is his money in the bank. So that that is secure. There's no cyber crime to attack his money in the bank. All the banks in Nigeria, they make sure that there's cybersecurity in their bank.
Yeah.
They spend so much money.
And in fact, Nigeria has done pretty well.
Every bank, if you go and look at their budget, they have so much money allocated for cybersecurity to protect themselves and to protect their customers. Because once a bank is one of the victims of cybercrime regularly, many people will go to the other bank. So they are spending so much money to make sure they are cyber protected. And now, after that, they declare humongous profits. So we don't need to pay them again for cybersecurity. Now, that is for money. The other area where you need cybersecurity in the social media. Social media is by choice. Okay? Today, you have the artificial intelligence. They can make Charles say what he did not say. Cybersecurity to protect you. It's your choice now to use the social media. It's not the government's business to protect you on that.
Yeah, but it's not just about Nigerians.
No.
It's an interconnected network, and Nigeria is a signatory to cybercrime regulations and acts around the world. And therefore, there are certain things that it needs to do in order to conform to those regulations and to bring Nigeria up technologically and otherwise to a standard where investors and so on would not be afraid to go to Nigeria. In other words, it needs to meet a certain standard, which is why the government is saying, I mean, it's funny, here you and I are reversing positions. You're the one who should be speaking on behalf of the government, not me.
Okay, so...
But I'm just trying to explain, because our job is to make sure that people understand what is going on.
Okay, so...
That's why that's what the government says is the reason why it's doing this. But the point remains that there's a lot of questions about the fact that, I think the central bank has created a fund or something where all these monies are going to go into. And, with Nigeria, people get nervous. Once large amounts of money start coming in, they start to worry and wonder, what are they going to do with that money? What you know what I mean? How are they going to police the money? Never mind policing the internet.
Okay.
So that's part of this.
Okay, so... From my calculations, I can really say that if this 0.5% levy is implemented, the government of Nigeria, minimum 3 trillion naira would be accrued for that particular levy. Do you know what 3 trillion naira can do for Nigeria today? Do you know what 3 trillion can do to make sure that millions of Nigerians don't die from malaria, from cancer, from so many other diseases? We need to prepare even for epidemics like coronavirus that may come later. What are we doing to make sure we are prepared?
Well, I'm glad you
So we don't need all that.
Yeah.
We don't need to spend money now. We should have priorities. In America today, they have priority for defense because they are going into war every day. We are not going to any war. Why must we spend all the money on defense when we are not in war? And not spend money on what is killing our people, diminishing our population.
Well,
priorities must change.
Some would argue that Nigeria is in a sort of war. I mean, that there is internal crisis from insecurity
Yes.
plaguing the country. And as a result of that, and Nigeria has not been able to get on top of it, as a result of that, it's had a knock-on effect on the economy. So the things that you're talking, the security is as much a priority as health is.
Well, it's relative.
I mean, the point here, Senator, is that it looks like your party, the APC, is very good at confusion, isn't it? I mean, let's look, for instance, at what is happening in Rivers State. An APC acting chairman who is not substantive and whose chairmanship is in dispute in court is giving impeachment instructions to assemblymen who defected from the PDP to the APC and who are not sure that they're still lawmakers. I mean, talk about confusion wrapped in bewilderment and shrouded in befuddlement. You see what I mean? I mean, what is your take on that? Let's just talk about Rivers State briefly before we move forward and talk about the health, very important health things that you were mentioning there.
Well, I will just go philosophical and also go into the deep. Only the deep can call to the deep. But what is important is to know, as a Christian that I am, out of every 12, there's one Judas. You can't have a perfect party.
Well, I think the word perfect is very is far from
I know. But I just want you to
Right.
have a kind of understanding. Now, any decent government must be guided by the Constitution. Whatever the Constitution does not allow must not be done. So I believe the government or the people involved in the party, there will be a reboot like in the computer. Okay? They will come back to normal.
So
Constitution.
you're
be guided by the Constitution.
You're
That's all.
indicting your party.
I'm not indicting my party.
Because they haven't been guided by the Constitution.
Well,
even the president wasn't guided by the Constitution.
Well,
he was guided by political sentiment.
No one is perfect.
Well,
but I know.
When you say no one is perfect,
Yes.
it's almost like you're saying it. I mean, it's almost like a joke, because the reason I say that is that the very foundation upon which the president claims the presidency is the Constitution.
Well, watch the next few days. Watch the next few days. I mean, if you make a mistake today, you will correct yourself. But what's important is we are guided by the Constitution. Even in religion, we are guided by the Bible or the Quran. So if you miss your way, you go back to the Bible or to the Constitution or to the Quran. Okay?
And you're confident that they will go back? Because
this is a very listening.
We don't hear anybody talking about
This is a very listening government.
Right.
You always, if you notice, when there is outcry on issues, one way or the other, we come back to satisfy the people, majority of the population.
Okay.
So I can assure you that in a few days or day, you will get back
So
the correct situation.
on the basis of the fact that you said that this is a listening government,
Yes.
and on the basis of the fact that the levy has not yet taken effect,
Yes.
it's expected to do that in a fortnight,
Yes.
what would you advise the government to do? I know you mentioned that previously. You were a senator, as I said before, you had constituents, and I expect that among many of them, they would oppose the new tax. Would you advise the government to scrap the tax? I think you essentially said that.
Well, I will not say scrap, I will say modify. Modify. Okay? You tax the taxable people. Okay? Don't tax people that are still struggling with what they have. You tax the people that are giving out money and they can afford to give out to the government. So that's all.
Okay. Well, that's a good way to summarize that part of the conversation. And now let's segue into the other part, which is, I would say, arguably your comfort zone, going beyond taxes and political shenanigans and talking a little bit about health, which is the sector that you are in at the moment. As I said, in addition to being a politician, you are, of course, a medical doctor. And I understand that you're into biodiversity, loss of its impact on human health and all the rest of it. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, biodiversity, you need to break it down for everyone to understand what it means. Biodiversity has to do with the relationship of animals, insects, and any living organism in the forest or in the garden or any other area that is not where we live. Their relationship with human beings. To see how we make sure that symbiotic relationship is maintained. Because all the diseases that are happening today is because we are disturbing that symbiosis. We are breaking down all our forests, cutting the trees for commercial purposes. We are building roads in the forest, cutting the trees. We are doing so many things, disturbing all these insects, disturbing all these animals where they are supposed to be. That is why coronavirus came to us. That is why Ebola virus came to us. That is why monkeypox came to us. Because these viruses, their habitat is normally animals. We are now trying to make sure that since we are killing all the animals, killing all the insects, killing all these zoonotic organisms, of course they have to look for somewhere else to have habitation. And now coronavirus came to habitate in human beings. Ebola virus came to habitate in human beings. Monkeypox virus came to habitate in us. So now all the governments in Africa, Nigeria in particular, we are focusing on how we cure the problems caused by these parasites and these pathogens that are inhabiting the animals that are now coming to us. So now, you will be surprised that I was in New York, I was in America, and Europe. They are many miles away from what we think. They are studying these animals to see how we can ensure that the DNA or the structure of these animals cannot accommodate viruses or pathogens that can affect us. Meanwhile, in West Africa, not Nigeria, in West Africa, we don't have any research going on concerning studying the animals within us. That is biodiversity that we have destroyed, that's affecting human health. Well, so that is where we are trying to concentrate on now. Everybody is concentrating on how we cure their problems, the problems that arise from this.
Well, we're looking at pictures of you up there now, and let me make the point that in your work with international scientists in the US and Europe on the impact, as you were saying there, of the loss of biodiversity on human health, your late mom and dad were honored by your colleagues in America by naming two newly discovered, I mean, that's your mother's photo there that we just saw, two newly discovered insect species were named after them. That is brilliant. Tell us about it.
Well, I mean, I was surprised. I lost my mother in February, and she was buried on the 1st of March.
And you mean this year?
Yeah, this year.
Well, you have my condolences.
Thank you very much. To my surprise, my colleagues, we've been working on this for a long time, but there's no need to make noise until when we get results. And they decided to honor my mother, my late mother, and also my father, with some new species that were discovered in Congo.
Right. So what are the species?
It's called Sonita species. Okay, we have over 3 million species of insects.
Yeah, but what kind of insects are they?
Well, they are friendly insects, and we have some very problematic insects.
Right.
The insects for malaria, for example, it carries the parasite called the falciparum parasite. It's not a friendly insect.
Yeah.
We have butterflies. You know, we have insects that make sure that the oxygen that we need, that is, we are getting free of charge. You can remember during COVID, we were paying for oxygen. Some people were paying for oxygen. But we don't take it serious until when we have the problem.
Okay.
Okay, we need to have all this oxygen coming for us free of charge.
Well, I congratulate you on the work that you're doing there, and also on your capacity to wear different hats. I mean, you know, it really is quite impressive, and I want to thank you very much indeed for coming in. Senator Dr. Olanrewaju Tejuoso is the former senator, of course, until recently the pro-chancellor of the University of Lagos, and he is also an APC chieftain. Thank you very much indeed.